The Promise Under Alien Stars. The war had ended, but the sky still smelled like smoke. Daniel walked through the ruins of the small alien village, his boots crunching over broken metal and burned stone. He wasn't a soldier, just a human mechanic. He had come with the relief team to help fix whatever machines could still run, but most things here were beyond repair. He heard a sound, a whimper. Daniel stopped. The wind had died. The sound came again, soft, almost like a cry. He turned the corner of a broken home and saw her. A small alien girl, no older than 13. Her skin was pale violet, her hair a soft blue. She sat beside the body of a dead alien woman, maybe her mother, curled up, her arms hugging her knees. She looked up at him with large golden eyes. Daniel slowly knelt down. "Hey, are you hurt?" She didn't answer. She just stared at him. He noticed her hands were shaking. "I won't hurt you," he said gently, pulling out a protein bar from his jacket. "You hungry?" The girl's eyes flicked to the bar. Then, slowly, she reached out and took it. She didn't thank him, she just started eating like she hadn't eaten in days. "What's your name?" Daniel asked. She chewed slowly, then whispered, "Alira." "Alira," he repeated softly. "That's a beautiful name." She blinked at him, surprised by the kindness. Over the next few days, Daniel stayed in the village to help. Alira followed him everywhere. She didn't speak much, but she listened to everything he said. He taught her how to use some tools, how to fix a simple generator. She was smart, very smart. And even though she barely smiled, he could tell she liked being around him. She had no family left. Her people had either died or fled during the war. Daniel asked the relief team if she could go with them to the human colony. They said it wasn't allowed. She wasn't registered. She'd have to be taken to a nearby alien orphan center. When Daniel told Alira this, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to go," she said. He sighed, kneeling in front of her. "I wish I could take you with me, but I can't. I'm not allowed." Alira was silent for a moment. Then she stood tall, looked straight into his eyes and said something he would never forget. "When I grow up, I'll come back, I'll marry you. Then we'll be together forever." Daniel blinked. "What?" She nodded firmly, wiping her tears. "You're kind. You saved me. I won't forget. I promise." Daniel chuckled softly, thinking she was just a child saying something sweet. "Okay, Alira. I'll wait then." They said goodbye the next morning. Daniel stood beside the shuttle, watching as the orphan center ship arrived. Alira stood at the ramp, looking back at him one last time. She didn't cry, she just said, "Don't forget me." "I won't," Daniel promised, waving. But as the ship took off and the days turned into weeks and then into years, the memory of the little alien girl slowly faded. He moved on with life, repaired machines, helped build new colonies. He told people about the war, the ruins, the strange promise from a small alien girl. Most people just laughed. "No girl comes back to marry a man because of a sandwich and a warm jacket," they'd joke. Daniel smiled and agreed. But sometimes, late at night, he looked up at the stars and wondered where she was. 6 years passed. One quiet night, while Daniel was working in his small workshop at the edge of the colony, the ground began to hum. A ship landed just outside. Daniel stepped out, wiping grease off his hands, confused. No ships were expected tonight. The ship's door opened with a hiss. A figure stepped out. Tall, elegant, clad in smooth silver armor. Her long blue hair flowed down her back. Her eyes, those same golden eyes, met his. "Daniel," she said. He froze. "Alira," he whispered. She stepped closer. "I promised, didn't I?" He stared at her. She wasn't a child anymore. She was a woman, and she had come back. Daniel stood frozen in the doorway of his workshop as the tall figure stepped into the moonlight. The ship behind her was unlike anything he'd seen before. Sleek, quiet, clearly, not made by human hands. The woman's silver armor shimmered as she moved closer, but it was her eyes that stole his breath. Golden, just like before. And that voice, soft, calm, sure. When she said his name, it pulled something from deep inside him. "Elira?" he asked again, though he already knew. She gave a small nod, her lips curling in a quiet smile. "I said I'd come back," she whispered. 6 years had changed her completely. The skinny, frightened girl who once sat beside her mother's body was gone. Before him now stood a confident, alien woman, graceful yet strong, her voice rich and controlled. Daniel struggled to find words. He wasn't sure if he should be amazed or concerned. Why now?" he asked. She looked up at the stars for a moment. "I waited until I was old enough to choose. To leave my people. To find you. I never forgot you, Daniel." He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes scanning her. Was this really happening? So, that promise you made, it wasn't just a child's game. Elira's gaze didn't waver. Not to me. Her honesty hit him like a shock. "But you've changed," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "You're grown. A lot has happened." She nodded. "I trained. I became a warrior. I fought for the right to live by my own rules." Her eyes lowered for just a moment. "But I never felt safe. Not truly. Not like I did with you." Daniel felt something stir inside him, a strange warmth and fear all at once. She looked around at his workshop. "You still fix things," she said, stepping inside without waiting. "You smell the same: metal, fire, oil." Her words made his heart race faster. "You came all this way just for me?" he asked, trying to keep his voice light. "Yes," she said. "I came back because I gave you my word. But also, because I want to know if you still have room in your life for me." He sat on a bench, needing to think, his head spinning. This wasn't some romantic movie, this was real. A girl he had saved during war was now a woman who had traveled across stars, claiming a bond he barely remembered. But as he looked at her, her eyes, her confidence, the way she stood there like she belonged, it was hard to deny the deep pull in his chest. "I don't know what to say," he finally told her. "You don't have to say anything tonight," she replied softly. "Just let me stay. For a while." Daniel hesitated, then gave a small nod. "I have a spare room in the back." Her smile widened, and for a second he saw the little girl from the past flash in those golden eyes. That night Elira sat quietly at his kitchen table, watching him cook. She didn't eat much, just stared, as if memorizing every moment. He tried asking her about her journey, her people, her life, but she only said one thing that mattered. "They wanted me to marry someone else, a noble, a stranger. I ran before the ceremony. They'll come looking for me." His chest tightened. "So you're in danger?" She gave a slow nod. "But I'd rather die free than live in a cage." Daniel stayed quiet after that. When she went to sleep, he stood outside under the stars, staring at the night sky and thinking. What had just walked back into his life? He wasn't sure yet. But one thing he knew for certain: she wasn't a little girl anymore. And she hadn't come just to say hello. She came to stay. Or at least she hoped to. Somewhere far above, among the stars, a distant ship blinked into silent motion, tracking the energy signal from her craft. And back inside the small home, Elira laid awake in the quiet room, clutching the same broken pendant he had once fixed for her years ago. Her whisper was soft, almost too soft to hear. "Don't send me away this time, Daniel." Her journey was not over. It had only just begun. Daniel woke up before sunrise, but Elira was already outside, standing still near the edge of the field, her long hair moving gently with the early wind. She held something in her hands, an old broken tool he remembered giving her years ago. She hadn't let go of it all these years. As he approached, she turned slowly and smiled, but there was something behind that smile now. Something heavy. "They're coming," she said softly, not looking afraid, only prepared. "Who?" Daniel asked, though part of him already knew. "My people," she replied. "Not my parents, they're gone, but those who rule the house I was born into. I was supposed to marry into another powerful clan. When I ran, I didn't just shame them. I broke the alliance." Daniel's heart sank. "So now they want to punish you?" "Worse," she whispered. "They'll hunt me like prey, and anyone who protects me." Daniel rubbed his face, trying to think. He was just a mechanic, not a soldier, not a fighter. But he also knew he couldn't turn her away, not after everything. "I don't care," he said finally. "Let them come. We'll deal with it." Illyra stared at him for a moment, then reached out and gently touched his hand. "That's why I came back to you, Daniel. Not because I need saving, but because you were the only one who never asked for anything in return." That moment was cut short by the sudden sharp whine of an engine overhead. A black dot zipped across the sky, then circled back like a hawk. Daniel knew that wasn't a cargo ship or a farming drone. "They found us," Illyra said, stepping back. The ship landed far enough to not draw attention from others, but close enough to watch the workshop. Daniel and Illyra slipped inside and began locking the doors. She helped him move scrap metal and old crates in front of windows. "You ever fight before?" Daniel asked. "Yes," she answered, picking up one of his tools like a blade, "but I'd rather not kill anyone today." Minutes later, the door shook with a heavy knock. Daniel held his breath. Illyra stood still, silent like a shadow. Then came the voice, low, robotic, and cruel. "We tracked her signature here. Bring her out, human, or we'll take her from your ashes." Daniel opened the small viewing panel in the door. A figure stood outside, wrapped in dark armor, a bounty hunter. The helmet had a red line across the front, blinking slowly. This wasn't a royal guard. This was worse, someone paid to bring her back no matter what. "You're not welcome here," Daniel shouted. "This is Earth territory." "Then Earth will burn," the hunter replied. Suddenly, a small device was tossed through the side window. It clanked and hissed. Gas. Daniel grabbed Illyra's hand and pulled her through the back as the front door burst open. They ran into the junkyard behind the workshop, weaving through rows of rusted ship parts and broken machines. Daniel's heart pounded. He hadn't run like this in years. "I know this place," he gasped. "We can lose him through the old wreckage tunnel." Illyra nodded, keeping pace. Behind them, the hunter didn't rush. He moved slowly, scanning the ground with glowing red eyes. They slipped into the tunnel made of twisted metal and half-buried ship hulls. Daniel led the way with a flashlight. "You sure you want to be part of this mess?" Illyra asked him, her voice almost lost in the echo. "I already am," he replied. "And if you think I'm going to let some overpaid metal skull drag you off, you really don't know me." They reached a dark room at the end, his old repair chamber from years ago. Daniel quickly pulled open a floor hatch and helped her down. Just as he closed it, the door behind them exploded. The bounty hunter stepped inside, silent, calm. He scanned the room, unaware that they were just beneath him. Illyra waited in the shadows, breathing quietly. Daniel could hear her heart, fast but steady. She wasn't afraid. She was ready. The hunter paused, then spoke to himself. No. Heat trail? No scent. They went underground. He turned and walked away. Inside the cramped hidden space, Daniel looked at her. "He's not going to stop." "Neither will I," she replied. "If they take me, they'll force me into a life I never wanted. I'd rather die here with you than live there without a name." Daniel didn't say anything. He just reached over and held her hand. Her fingers squeezed his in return. She was no longer a child, and he was no longer just the man who once gave her food. Now they were something more, something bound by promises, choices, and danger. Outside, the bounty hunter climbed a hill and placed a call. The girl is here. The human protects her. Permission to eliminate. A voice crackled. Through the comm. Not yet, she must be returned alive, but kill the man if needed. And far below that hill, in a hidden chamber of old metal, Daniel and Alira prepared for the storm that was coming. The night air smelled of rust and smoke as Daniel and Alira moved quietly through the junkyard, careful not to make a sound. Above them, the stars blinked coldly, but the danger below felt far too close. The bounty hunter was still nearby, his scanner sweeping the landscape like a silent predator. Every now and then, they heard the crackle of static and the low buzz of his voice speaking to someone far worse. Daniel kept glancing at Alira, her face calm but focused, her steps sure. She didn't look like a runaway anymore. She looked like a soldier. And yet when she looked at him, there was still that flicker of trust in her golden eyes, the same one she'd had as a child. This way, Daniel whispered, guiding her between two wrecked transport pods. The junkyard was huge. A graveyard of forgotten machines, broken fighters, shattered shuttles, and rusted cargo haulers. Daniel had worked here for years, salvaging parts no one wanted. Now that knowledge might save both their lives. They slid beneath a collapsed satellite dish and into a half-buried shuttle. Daniel shut the heavy door behind them and they paused, catching their breath. "We can't keep running forever," he said, his voice low. "There's a tunnel under Bay 9. I helped to dig it when we hid from storms. It leads out of the junkyard, but it's narrow and half-collapsed. We'll make it," Alira said without hesitation. Daniel believed her. Somehow he always did. They made their way there, crawling through shadows, avoiding the glow of the hunter's red visor that roamed just out of sight. At one point, Daniel stepped on a loose pipe. The clank echoed loud. They froze. Seconds later, a blast scorched the ground beside them. The hunter had found them. "Run!" Daniel shouted, grabbing her hand. They bolted, weaving through stacks of scrap, leaping over old engine cores and broken gears. Behind them, the bounty hunter fired again, each shot sending sparks flying. Alira moved fast like she'd trained for this all her life. But Daniel, older, slower, was starting to fall behind. She noticed. Without a word, she turned, pulled him into cover, and launched a broken crate toward the attacker using the yeo, strength hidden in her muscles. It crashed into the hunter's path, buying them a few seconds. "You okay?" she asked. "Not as young as I used to be," he panted, "but I'll keep up." They reached Bay 9. It was a wide metal platform covered in dirt and dust. In the center was a hidden hatch, nearly invisible to any outsider. Daniel knelt, brushed away the debris and pulled it open. A narrow tunnel stretched into darkness. "You first," he said. She hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you. Trust me." She climbed in, and he followed, pulling the hatch shut just as another blast rang out behind them. The tunnel was cramped, barely enough for one person. Daniel had to crawl, his elbows scraping against the metal sides. Alira moved ahead with ease. "We're close," he said, voice echoing. "Once we reach the end, we'll be outside the colony's scanner zone. No one tracks anything out there unless they're already looking." "And if they're already looking?" she asked. "Then we run farther," he said. "I know places, empty farms, quiet stations. We'll figure it out." They finally reached the end, a small panel that led into the hills beyond. Daniel pushed it open and fresh air hit their faces. They emerged under the pale light of twin moons, surrounded by dry grass and silence. For a moment it felt peaceful. Too peaceful. Alira stood tall, looking around, breathing deeply. "We did it," she said softly, but then a sharp sound split the air. Not a weapon, not a machine. A voice, speaking in her native tongue. Alira froze. Daniel saw her eyes widen. "They're here," she whispered. "Not just one, a team." Figures stepped from the shadows, 3 armored aliens, different from the bounty hunter. They didn't attack. They surrounded the pair, slowly. One of them, taller than the others, removed his helmet. His face was sharp, proud, cold. "Elira of House Valterin," he said. "You are ordered to return. Your marriage awaits. Enough of this foolishness." She didn't move. "I've already chosen," she said. "I choose him." The man's face twisted in disgust. "A human? A filthy mechanic?" Daniel stepped forward, fists clenched. "Careful," he warned. "I may be a mechanic, but I'm not afraid of breaking things." The alien laughed. "You're nothing." Elira suddenly pulled a device from her belt, a small glowing disc. "Try to touch him, and I'll detonate this. We all go down together." The aliens paused, unsure if she was bluffing. Her hand didn't shake. Finally, the leader spat on the ground and signaled his men to withdraw. "This isn't over," he said. "We'll take you back, even if we have to rip him apart first." As they vanished into the night, Daniel turned to her. "Was that real?" She let out a shaky breath. "Yes, and I don't know how long. We can keep running, but I'm not giving up. Not now." "Neither am I," he replied. And together, under the alien moonlight, they kept walking, toward the unknown, side by side. The silence didn't last long. By the time Daniel and Elira reached the abandoned observatory on the edge of the canyon, the sky had already begun to change. A strange humming filled the air, like low thunder trapped behind the clouds, and the wind carried the scent of fuel and ozone. Daniel had only heard that sound once before, during a military evacuation years ago, and his stomach twisted. Elira stood by the broken window, her eyes fixed on the stars above. "They're here," she whispered, her voice quiet but full of certainty. "My family." Daniel joined her at the window and followed her gaze. 3 ships descended from the clouds in perfect formation, sleek, silent, glowing with royal markings. These were not bounty hunters or common guards. These were royal house ships. Elira's people had sent their best. The largest ship landed, in the clearing below, kicking up a storm of dust. Soldiers in white and silver armor marched out, forming a line. Then a tall woman stepped forward, her face hidden behind a golden veil, her posture regal, distant. "That's my aunt," Elira said softly. "High Lady Tiverine. She rules House Valterin now." Daniel didn't speak. He just stayed beside her, watching the small army prepare. Suddenly a voice echoed through the valley, smooth, cold, amplified by machines. "Elira of Valtorin, you are summoned back to your house. The marriage contract remains binding. Return now and your honor will be restored. Refuse, and your fate will fall with this human." Daniel felt her flinch. He turned to her. "You don't have to do anything they say." She met his eyes, her expression torn. "If I go, they'll spare you. If I don't, they'll hunt us forever." Daniel shook his head. "I'm not running anymore. Not from them. Not from this." He stepped forward, out onto the balcony, and shouted down, "She's not going back. She made her choice. You'll have to go through me." A deadly silence followed. The soldiers didn't move. The High Lady raised a hand, signaling calm. "Then let us speak face to face," she said. "You and I, human." Daniel hesitated. Elira put a hand on his arm. "Be careful. She's smart. And dangerous." He nodded and made his way down the winding steps of the observatory. At the bottom, the soldiers parted to let him through. The High Lady stood still, tall and proud, her veil fluttering gently in the breeze. "So," she said, her voice smooth and sharp, "you're the one who stole her." "She's not property," Daniel said flatly. "She left because she wanted to." The High Lady tilted her head. "Do you really think you can offer her more than we can? She is meant for power, legacy, bloodline. You're a mechanic." "I'm someone who never tried to own her," he replied. "That's more than you can say." The High Lady's expression darkened. "You love her?" Daniel hesitated, then nodded once. "Enough to stay, enough to fight." The High Lady studied him for a moment, then turned away. You are brave, human, but foolish. We'll give you until sunrise to surrender her. After that, we will take her by force. Daniel turned and walked back toward the observatory. Alira met him halfway, her eyes searching his. What did she say? They'll attack at sunrise, he answered. Unless you surrender. Alira clenched her fists. They'll kill you if I go with them. They'll punish me for leaving, and they'll erase every choice I've made. Daniel took her hands gently. Then we don't give them that choice. We stand. Here. The two of us? She asked, softly. It's not enough. Daniel smiled faintly. Then we find more. The rest of the night was a blur of movement. Daniel sent silent messages to nearby settlers, miners, and a few old war friends. Most didn't answer. Some replied with questions. A few said they were coming. As the sky turned pale with morning, Alira stood beside him in armor, made from scavenged metal and patched gear. Her hair was tied back, her face calm and proud. I've never worn armor that wasn't chosen for me, she said. This feels like mine. Daniel looked at her, truly looked, and felt something in his chest shift. She wasn't the child he once fed. She wasn't even the same girl who returned days ago. She was a woman, a fighter, a flame, and she had chosen him. Just before the first light of dawn broke, a small convoy arrived. Miners, farmers, off-duty, colony guards, not many, but enough. They came for you? Alira asked. Daniel shook his head. They came for us. As the royal army lined up again below, preparing for battle, Alira stepped to the edge of the observatory and called out, her voice strong. I am not yours to bind, not your trophy, not your bargaining chip. I choose my life. I choose this world. And I choose this man. And as the sun began to rise, the air filled with tension, heat, and the certainty that blood would soon be spilled for a promise once made under alien stars. The first ray of sunlight touched the metal roof of the observatory as the air filled with a low, vibrating hum, like the ground itself was holding its breath. Daniel stood at the front line with a rusted blaster in his hands, its power cell, blinking faintly while beside him. Alira adjusted the straps on her handmade armor, her face set with quiet strength. Behind them stood a mismatched group of settlers, farmers, and outlaws, no polished warriors, but people with enough grit to make any invader think twice. Across the hill, the royal soldiers stood in perfect formation, shields gleaming under, the rising sun waiting for the signal. High Lady Tiverine raised her hand, her golden veil fluttering in the breeze, and a voice boomed from the command ship, cold and final. Surrender Alira now, or face the wrath of House Valterin. No one moved. Daniel looked at Alira. She looked at him. Then she stepped forward alone, lifting a glowing disc from her belt and holding it high. If you want to take me, she shouted, then fight for it. But know this land will not kneel, and neither will I. With that, the first arrow of energy blasted through the air and the fight began. Chaos erupted instantly. The royal soldiers charged up the hill in formation, their boots shaking the ground. Daniel and the defenders opened fire from behind old cargo containers and walls of scrap metal, their weapons crude but effective. Explosions rang out, sending dirt and fire into the air. Alira moved like a storm through the battlefield, spinning, ducking, slashing with her energy blade crafted from broken parts and powered by her own core crystal. She wasn't fighting like a princess. She was fighting like someone with nothing left to lose. Daniel took cover behind a burned engine core, firing over the top, watching as two defenders fell beside him. The enemy was strong, organized, well-trained, but the defenders had something the royal guards didn't: heart and a reason to stand their ground. Each blast, each scream, each step back was fueled by more than just survival. It was loyalty. It was love. Alira reached the front line, cutting through two soldiers with stunning precision, her body a blur of silver and blue. Suddenly she froze. Across from her stood a towering figure in royal red armor, a long weapon in his hands, her former betrothed. You brought shame to our name, he shouted, stepping forward. You spit on the future of our people. Now you fight me? I never belonged to you, she said calmly, and I'll never be your wife. He lunged at her with fury, and their weapons clashed with a sound that cracked through the battlefield like thunder. Sparks flew as they fought, his strikes brutal, trained, controlled, but Elira matched him blow for blow, her movements fueled by purpose. They spun, crashed, fell and rose again, until finally she landed a hard strike to his chest, knocking him back. You could have had everything, he yelled. Power. Glory. I chose something greater, she whispered. Freedom. Then she disarmed him with a clean twist and held her blade to his throat. He dropped his weapon, stunned, defeated, not by strength, but by her will. Across the battlefield, the royal soldiers began to fall back, confused and scattered, their leader bested. Daniel ran to Elira's side as the defenders pushed forward, forcing the invaders back to their ships. The High Lady stepped forward, her face cold and unreadable. You have made your choice, she said. You have broken all ties with your house. Elira stepped beside Daniel and raised her voice for all to hear. I am no longer of your house, I make my own. Here, with him. The High Lady nodded once, slow and bitter. Then may the stars forget you. She turned, her troops following, in silent retreat. The ships lifted off slowly, fire and wind kicking up as they vanished into the sky. Silence fell. The defenders stood blinking in disbelief. The fight was over. They had won. Daniel exhaled, chest heaving, and looked at Elira. Dust on her face, cuts on her arms, and a light in her eyes that hadn't dimmed. She looked back at him, and for the first time she let herself lean into him. He held her close, not saying a word. He didn't have to. She had fought for her future, and she had chosen him. Around them, the others cheered softly, beginning to gather the wounded, put out small fires, and rebuild. But Elira and Daniel stood still together, watching the sun rise fully over a world that finally, after years of running, felt like home. The days that followed were quiet, but not empty. Smoke no longer rose from the fields, and the observatory, once falling apart, now echoed with laughter and the soft sounds of tools rebuilding walls and lives. Daniel's workshop had become the center of something new, a home, a gathering place, a symbol of what they had all fought for. Elira spent her mornings helping clear wreckage, her hands calloused from work, her eyes brighter than ever. Children from nearby settlements came to watch her train with a wooden staff in the yard, and old farmers shared meals with her like she had always belonged. Yet despite the peace, something still sat in Daniel's chest like a question waiting to be asked. One evening, as twin moons bathed the land in silver, Daniel stood on the roof with Elira beside him, both staring at the stars. She was quiet, but her shoulders were relaxed in a way he hadn't seen before. You know, she said softly, when I was little, I imagined this moment 1,000 times. Coming back to you, making good on my promise. Daniel turned to her, heart beating fast. You were just a child, he said. You didn't owe me anything. I know, she whispered. But I meant it. Even when I didn't understand love, I knew what it felt like to be safe with you. And I wanted to feel that again. She took a slow breath. I ran from a life where everything was chosen for me. Titles, marriage, even my words. But here, every choice is mine, and I choose this. I choose you. Her words hit him like the quietest storm, gentle but strong enough to move the deepest parts of his heart. Elira, he said, voice trembling, I'm not a king. I don't have a palace. I don't even have working plumbing half the time. She laughed, a real full laugh that shook her shoulders. I don't need a palace. I just need someone who sees me. All of me. He stepped closer, took her hand, and held it with the care of a man who had spent years fixing broken things, but never imagined someone choosing to stay whole beside him. Then stay, he said. Stay not because of a promise, but because it's what you truly want. I do, she whispered. I want to build a life here, with you. Word spread fast. By the next morning, the settlement buzzed with excitement. No official messages had been sent, no grand announcements made, but everyone knew something special was happening. On the third day, under the wide open sky and surrounded by friends who had become family, Elira walked across the field in a simple white cloth, stitched together by the wives of old miners. Her hair was woven with strands of copper wire, soft metal from Daniel's own workshop, and glowing beads from her people's broken heirlooms. She walked barefoot, not as a princess, but as a woman claiming her life. Daniel waited beneath the frame of a half-built ship, chosen not for beauty but because it was where they first met again. His jacket was patched, his boots dusty, but his eyes never left her. When she reached him, she didn't speak. She just took his hand and smiled, and that was all they needed. The ceremony was simple. A few words, a shared vow, a quiet kiss. That made the crowd cheer. But for Daniel and Elira, it was everything. It was freedom. It was home. After the sun dipped below the horizon, music filled the camp. Alien flutes and human drums played together, and laughter floated into the night air. Daniel sat beside Elira near a fire, watching the people dance, share food, and tell stories. He looked at her, her face glowing with happiness, and said, "You don't look like a runaway anymore." She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "That's because I finally arrived where I was meant to be." The stars above blinked, like quiet witnesses, and somewhere far in the galaxy, the name Elira of House Valtorin was erased from royal records, gone, forgotten. But in a corner of a rebuilt world, her name was spoken with love, remembered not as a title, but as a woman who had chosen her own path. Daniel wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close as the fire crackled beside them. "So, Mrs. Mechanic," he teased. She laughed again, soft and warm. "Not a bad trade for a kingdom," she replied. And as the night deepened and the music faded to quiet hums, they sat together, husband and wife, warrior and mechanic, two hearts once worlds apart, now joined forever, under the same stars where a promise had once been made.